The night was cold, colder than anything she had ever felt before. The alien mother walked slowly through the snow, her thin arms holding her tiny child close to her chest. The child was wrapped in a torn cloth, but the cloth gave no real warmth. Snowflakes fell on her face and froze in her hair. Her breath came out like white smoke, heavy and slow. Her feet were bare, cut from the ice, but she kept moving. She could not stop. If she stopped, the cold would take them both. The child was weak, his small chest rising and falling with soft sounds. She pressed her lips to his forehead, trying to give him her heat. The night was empty. No voices, no lights, no hope. Only the sound of the wind crying through the dead trees. She looked around, but there was nothing, just endless white. She wanted to scream, but her throat was dry. She wanted to cry, but her tears had already frozen long ago. Her legs shook. She was tired, too tired. She had not eaten in 2 days. The child had eaten even less. She whispered to him in her language, her words soft. "Stay, little one. Stay alive." But her voice was weak, and she wondered if the child could even hear her anymore. The storm grew harder. The snow fell thicker. Her arms ached from holding him. Her body begged her to lie down, to sleep, to let go, but she fought against it. If she died, he would die. She could not allow that, not yet. She stumbled and fell into the snow. The cold bit into her skin. She wanted to rise, but her strength was gone. She looked at her child's face. His lips were blue, his eyes closed, so still. She felt her heart break. There was no shelter, no fire, no friend. Her people had cast her out. They had called her weak, useless, unworthy. And now here she was, dying in the dark. She pulled the child closer, wrapping her own body around him. If death was here, then she would face it holding him. She pressed her forehead against his. "If we go," she whispered, "we go together." The snow piled over them, white and heavy. Her eyes closed. Her body went still. For a moment there was only silence, but then footsteps. Heavy steps broke the quiet night. Slow, strong, steady. A shadow moved through the storm. A tall figure in a thick coat. His breath came in clouds, but his eyes were sharp, searching the white. The alien mother did not hear him. Her mind was already far away, floating between life and death. But the child gave a weak cry, a sound too small for the storm, yet somehow the man heard it. He stopped. His head turned. He looked down at the snow. And then he saw them, 2 small bodies almost buried, frozen in the night. His eyes widened. He dropped to his knees. He brushed the snow away with his hands. The woman's face was pale, almost lifeless. The child's breath was thin, but it was there. Still there. The man pulled off his gloves. His hands were warm and rough. He touched the child first, pressing him to his chest. Then he looked at the mother. Her lips were cold, her skin like ice, but he felt a faint heartbeat. He did not speak. He only moved fast. He wrapped them in his coat, covering both mother and child. He lifted them, one arm under the woman, the other holding the child tight. His breath grew heavier as he stood, but his steps were strong. The storm raged around him, but he did not stop. He carried them through the night, his boots crushing the snow. His jaw was set, his eyes hard. Behind his mask of strength, his mind raced. Why here? Who are they? How long have they been out in this storm? He looked at the child's face, then at the mother's. And in his chest, something heavy stirred. The alien mother's eyes fluttered, half open. She saw only a blur. A face she did not know. A human. Fear struck her heart for a moment, but before she could think, darkness pulled her under again. The man did not let her fall. He held her closer, his breath fast in the frozen air. "Stay alive," he muttered, almost to himself. "Don't give up now." Through the storm, his shape moved like a shadow carrying fire. And as the night grew colder, a strange warmth followed with him. The frozen night was not silent anymore. Something had changed. Something had begun. The storm outside roared, but inside the small cabin, the sound of fire cracked softly. The man had carried the alien mother and her child through the freezing night, step after step, until he found this abandoned shelter in the woods. His shoulders burned from the weight, his chest heaved from the cold, but he had not stopped, not once. Now the woman lay on the old wooden floor, wrapped in his heavy coat. Her child was pressed against her, small and fragile, his breath shallow but still there. The man crouched near the fire he had made, adding broken pieces of wood. Sparks rose, chasing away the shadows. The warmth filled the room, little by little. He looked at them carefully. Her skin was pale, almost blue. Her lips trembled even in sleep. The child clung weakly to her torn cloth, too young to understand how close death had come. The man's jaw tightened. He knew he had found them in their final moments. Another hour in the storm and they would both be gone. He poured water into a tin cup and warmed it by the fire. Then he reached out with slow hands, touching the mother's shoulder. She stirred. Her eyelids fluttered open. For a moment, confusion filled her gaze. The firelight glowed on her wide alien eyes, and when she saw the human face above her, fear shot through her. She tried to move, tried to sit, but her weak body failed her. She pulled her child closer instead, holding him tight, against her chest as if to guard him from this stranger. Her breathing grew quick, shallow, panicked. The man raised one hand, palm open, a sign of peace. His voice was calm, steady. "You're safe," he said. "The cold won't take you tonight." But his words were human words. She did not understand them. Her eyes narrowed, still filled with fear. She whispered something in her own tongue, her voice sharp, protective. The man shook his head, not knowing what she meant. Still, he stayed where he was, not moving closer. The silence stretched between them, broken only by the crackle of fire and the cry of the storm outside. Two strangers, two different worlds, yet bound together in this moment. The child gave a soft cough. The sound made her flinch, then bend over him quickly. She rocked him, whispering to him, begging him to breathe stronger. The man watched. He could see the pain in her face, the desperation. Slowly he reached again to the fire, lifted the tin cup and held it out to her. She stared at it, uncertain. He did not force it. He only placed the cup near her hands and leaned back. After a long pause, she reached for it. Her fingers shook so badly she almost spilled it, but she lifted it to her lips and drank. Warmth spread through her chest, bringing life back to her eyes. She gave a drop to her child as well, letting the boy's lips touch the water. The man nodded slowly. She looked at him, still frightened, but not as much as before. The firelight made his features softer. Tired eyes, a face marked by wind and scars, but not cruel. His silence was heavy, yet his actions spoke louder than words. He stood and walked to the door. She tensed, afraid he might leave, but he only checked outside, making sure the storm still covered their trail. Then he shut the door again and returned to the fire. He sat down across from her, his back against the wall, his eyes never leaving her and the child. Time passed. The fire grew stronger. The mother pulled the coat tighter around herself and her little one. Her breaths were steadier now, though her body still shivered. She dared to glance at the man. Who was he? Why had he carried her? Why had he not harmed her, when so many others would have? She whispered something again. A question. Her alien words filled the quiet. The man tilted his head, not understanding, but his eyes softened, as if he felt the meaning behind her tone. He answered with silence, only nodding once. Her gaze lingered, on him longer this time. In her people stories, humans were said to be dangerous, selfish, violent, quick to turn on others. Yet this one had lifted her from death, given her fire, given her water. His silence was not cruel, but careful. She began to wonder if perhaps the stories were wrong. The child stirred, letting out a tiny cry. The man's eyes moved at once, sharp and alert. He reached for a small bag at his side and pulled out a piece of dried bread. He held it out, not to her directly, but set it gently on the floor between them. She hesitated. Was it a trick? But her child's hunger was too strong. Slowly she reached for it. When she touched the bread, her hands trembled again, not only from weakness but from emotion. Food, warmth, safety, things she had not known in so long. She broke a piece, gave it to her child, and pressed another piece to her lips. Tears welled in her eyes. The man did not look away. He only watched quietly, as if guarding her even from the shadows in the room. The storm outside began to calm. The fire burned steady, and for the first time in many nights, the alien mother felt something strange inside her chest. Not just fear, not just hunger, but the beginning of hope. Yet in the silence, a question burned in her mind. Why is he helping me? And in the man's quiet eyes, a secret lingered, hidden in the flames. The fire burned brighter now. The broken cabin walls still shook with the sound of the storm outside, but inside, warmth finally began to return. Smoke curled upward through a crack in the roof. The small space smelled of wood, dust, and faint life. The alien mother sat near the fire, still wrapped in the man's heavy coat. Her child lay against her chest, tiny breaths coming steadier now. Every rise and fall of his little chest was a blessing. She pressed her lips to his forehead, whispering softly, though the man across from her could not understand. The man watched, silently. His eyes were sharp, scanning every movement of the flames, every sound of the wind. Yet his gaze often returned to the two figures he had saved. He had carried them from death, but now he wondered, what had he brought into his shelter? A stranger? A burden? Or something more? The mother's eyes flicked toward him. She was still wary, still uncertain of his silence. Humans were not known for kindness in her world. Yet here he was, offering warmth, water, even food. She studied his face in the glow of the fire. His skin was scarred, his jaw hard, but his eyes, they were steady, not cruel, not greedy, but heavy, as if carrying a past she could not see. The child whimpered. At once the man leaned forward, his hand went to his bag again. This time he pulled out a small flask. He poured a little into a tin lid and slid it across the floor. She hesitated, glancing at him, then slowly lifted the lid to her child's lips. The boy drank weakly, but life flickered in him again. She let out a breath she didn't know she was holding. "Thank you," she whispered in her tongue. He didn't know the words, but her tone carried across the silence. For the first time, he gave a small nod. The fire popped. Sparks danced. The mother's thoughts drifted back to the night before, to the endless snow, to the moment she had closed her eyes, ready for death. If not for him, her body and her child's would already be buried beneath white silence. The thought made her shiver. She looked at the fire, then at the man. Why had he done it? The man finally spoke, his voice low and calm. "You're safe here." She tilted her head, not understanding the words, but his tone was clear. The way his voice softened when he looked at her child, there was no threat in it, only promise. Still, fear lived in her heart. What if others came? What if this kindness was only temporary? She held her child tighter, eyes darting to the door. The man noticed. He stood slowly and walked to the door, pulling it tighter against the storm. Then he dragged a broken piece of wood across it, locking it shut. When he turned back, the flames cast his shadow tall and strong against the wall. For a moment, she thought he looked like a guardian, one who stood between them and the cold world outside. He sat again, closer to the fire now. His face glowed in the light. She watched him quietly, still holding her child. The fire's warmth touched her skin, but it was his presence that made her heart steady. Hours passed in silence. The storm began to ease. The mother felt her eyelids grow heavy. Her body begged for rest, yet she fought it. She feared closing her eyes, but exhaustion was stronger. She slumped a little, her head dipping, her arms still tight around her child. "Hurry," man noticed. He shifted, pulling another piece of cloth from his bag. Slowly, carefully, he leaned forward and placed it over her shoulders. She stirred, eyes opening just enough to see what he was doing. Her lips parted, but no words came. Only tears filled her eyes. Not from pain. From something she had almost forgotten existed. Care. The firelight shimmered on her wet cheeks. She looked at him for a long moment, and for the first time her gaze softened. He looked back, his face unreadable, but his silence spoke more than any words could. The child gave a soft cry again, pulling her attention away. She soothed him, rocking him gently. When she looked up again, the man was still watching. His eyes carried questions, but he did not ask them. His mouth remained shut, as if he had learned long ago that words could not fix every wound. The storm outside finally broke. The wind grew weaker. Snow still fell, but it no longer screamed against the walls. The night was ending. The mother leaned closer to the fire, whispering to her child, promising him safety she wasn't sure she could give. The man sat still, but in his chest a thought burned. He had found them by chance. But was it really chance? The fire crackled. The warmth spread. And for the first time in many long nights, she believed her child might see the dawn. Yet as the flames glowed, shadows moved outside the cabin, figures hidden by snow searching the storm. The mother did not know it yet, but her past had followed her. And soon, the fire would no longer be enough. The storm outside had finally calmed, but inside the broken cabin the fire still burned. Smoke curled softly, the only sign of life in the endless white world. The alien mother sat close to the flames, her child asleep in her arms. The man sat across from her, silent as ever, his back against the wall, his eyes heavy with thought. For hours they had shared this quiet. Only the crackling of fire and the faint breathing of the child filled the air. Yet silence could not hide the questions that burned in both their hearts. Who was he? Why had he saved her? And in his mind, another question. Who is she running from? The woman shifted, pulling her child closer. Her eyes stared into the fire, but her thoughts were far away, chained to memories she wished she could forget. She could feel his gaze on her. She knew he wanted answers. And deep inside, a part of her longed to speak, to finally release the weight she carried. Her lips parted. At first, no words came. Then a whisper in her own language slipped out. He did not understand, but the sadness in her tone was clear. She raised her hand, pointing to herself, then to the child. Slowly, haltingly, she tried to shape human words. Her voice was rough, but a single word came. Outcast. The man's eyes narrowed slightly. He did not interrupt. He only listened. Her voice grew steadier, though still broken. She placed a hand on her child's head. Not wanted, punished, my people say no. Her throat tightened and she swallowed before continuing. Because of him. The man leaned forward, his brow furrowed. She clutched her son tighter, as if the very memory might snatch him away. She spoke again, slower this time, choosing each human word with care. They wanted me to leave him, to let him die. Her voice shook. Her hands trembled around the boy. I say no. I take him. I run. The fire snapped, throwing sparks upward. Her face glowed with pain. Tears welled in her eyes, but she blinked them back, forcing herself to continue. They say I shame them. Weak mother, useless. Better to end him, better to end me. But I not let them. Her words broke, heavy with grief. The man's jaw tightened. His silence grew heavier, but his eyes burned now, sharp and fierce. She looked at him, searching his face for judgment. In her world, no one had understood. To them, she had been a traitor to her own kind. But this human stranger, would he think the same? The man finally spoke, his voice low. You chose life. She did not know every word, but she understood enough. Her lips parted, her breath catching. A single tear slid down her cheek. She nodded slowly. Yes. Life. For the first time since meeting him, she felt something shift in her chest. A strange warmth that had nothing to do with the fire. Someone, finally, did not look at her with hate. The man leaned back, his hand resting near his weapon. His face remained hard, but inside him old scars burned. He remembered other children, other wars, other choices forced upon the weak. He had seen cruelty before, too much. And now, looking at her, he felt the weight of her suffering as if it were his. Silence fell again, but it was different this time. Not empty, not cold. It was heavy with unspoken truths, with a bond neither of them had expected. The child stirred in his sleep, a small sound escaping his lips. The mother soothed him, rocking him gently, whispering in her tongue. The man's eyes softened, following, the way her arms cradled the boy with desperate love. Then, faint but sharp, a sound reached his ears. He tensed. Outside in the fading storm, something moved, a crunch of snow, heavy and deliberate. His head snapped toward the door. The mother noticed his change. Her heart froze. She knew that sound, too familiar. Her eyes widened with terror. She whispered one word under her breath, her people's word for hunters. The man's hand gripped his weapon. His eyes flicked to her, demanding truth without words. She nodded quickly, fear shaking her voice. They follow, always follow, never stop. The cabin grew darker. The firelight felt smaller now, fragile against the threat outside. The woman clutched her child as if the hunters might break through, at any moment. Her breaths came fast, her chest heaving. The man rose slowly, tall and unyielding in the glow of the flames. His shadow fell across her, across the child, across the walls. His voice was calm, steady, but it carried steel. They won't take him. Or you. Her lips parted in shock. No one had ever spoken those words to her before. No one had ever promised to stand between her and her past. Outside, the crunch of snow grew closer. Dark shapes moved beyond the broken window. The mother's heart raced, the fire flickered, and the man's hand tightened around his weapon. The hidden past had caught them, and the night was about to bleed with danger. The night had grown quiet again, but the silence was not safe. It was the silence before danger, heavy and sharp like a blade in the dark. The man stood near the broken door, his hand tight around his weapon. The alien mother sat by the fire, clutching her child close to her chest. Her eyes were wide, her breath shallow. She knew what was coming. Outside, the snow crunched under steady feet. Not one, not two, many. Shapes moved in the fading storm. Their voices were low, guttural, speaking in the language she knew too well. Hunters, her people's enforcers, the ones sent to punish, to take back what she had stolen, her child's life. The man glanced back at her. He could not understand their words, but he did not need to. He read the terror on her face, the way her arms tightened around her son, the way her body trembled. That was enough, she whispered, almost broken. They come. They take him. Kill me. The man's jaw tightened. His eyes burned with something colder than the storm outside. He turned back to the door. Not while I breathe. The hunters drew closer. Their shadows passed over the cracked window, long and monstrous in the firelight. One voice called out, deep and cruel. It echoed through the cabin walls. The woman flinched, covering her child's ears. She shook her head at the man, her words tumbling in panic. Too many. You fight, you die. Please, hide, run. But the man did not move from the door. His voice was steady, unshaken. You stay. Keep the child safe. I'll deal with them. She stared at him in disbelief. No one had ever spoken such words for her before. No one had ever chosen to stand for her, to fight when death seemed certain. Her heart pounded. torn between fear and a strange spark of hope. The first blow came. The hunters slammed against the door, shaking the cabin. Wood cracked, dust falling from the beams. The fire flickered wildly. The child whimpered, and the mother held him tighter, whispering desperate prayers. The man raised his weapon. His stance was calm, solid like a wall that would not fall. Another slam hit the door, harder this time. Splinters flew. The hunters roared, voices filled with bloodlust. Then, with a final crash, the door burst open. Snow and shadows flooded in. The first hunter stepped inside, taller than the man, his skin armored, his eyes glowing with hate. Behind him, more figures pushed forward, weapons gleaming in the stormlight. Their stench of cold metal and cruelty filled the cabin. The woman gasped. She pressed herself against the wall, shielding her child. Her heart screamed. She wanted to run, but there was nowhere to go. The man stepped forward instead. His body blocked their view of her, his shadow stretching over her like a shield. His voice was low, deadly calm. "You'll touch them over my dead body." The hunters laughed, a harsh, cruel sound. One raised his weapon, pointing it at the man. But the man moved first. Steel flashed in the firelight. The sound of impact filled the cabin. The first hunter stumbled back, roaring as blood darkened. The snow at his feet. The man did not stop. He struck again, each movement sharp and precise, a storm of his own. The room exploded into chaos. The fire flared as bodies crashed against the walls. The hunters growled and swung, but the man fought like something born of war. His boots crushed snow and wood alike, his arms heavy with strength, his eyes unyielding. The mother could only watch, frozen between fear and awe. She had seen humans before, but never like this. This was not a man fighting for himself. This was a man fighting for someone else. For her child. One hunter lunged toward her. She screamed, holding her child tighter. But before the creature could reach her, the man's blade cut through the air. The hunter fell, blood staining the floor. Her tears spilled. Her heart shook. He was standing between her and the darkness, tearing down every threat that dared step closer. But there were so many. Too many. The hunters surrounded him, their weapons striking, their voices roaring. His body bled, wounds cutting into his flesh. Yet he did not fall. His breath came in fire, his strikes heavier with each moment. The cabin trembled with the sound of battle. The child cried, the mother rocked him, whispering words of comfort that shook with fear. Every second felt like the last. Then, as quickly as it began, silence returned. The hunters lay broken on the snow-covered floor, their bodies still. Blood and shadows filled the room. The firelight flickered weakly, almost afraid to shine on the scene. The man stood in the middle, his chest heaving, his hands red. His weapon dripped. His eyes burned, not with fear, but with the strength of someone who had chosen to fight no matter the cost. He turned, his gaze finding the mother and child. She trembled, tears streaming down her face. Her lips moved, whispering in disbelief. Why you fight for me?" The man did not answer. He only stepped forward, his shadow falling over her once again, a wall against the world. But outside, the cabin, more shadows stirred in the snow. The battle was not over. The storm had only just begun. The cabin was filled with the stench of blood and smoke. Broken bodies of hunters lay sprawled across the floor, their black blood soaking into the snow that had blown in from the shattered door. The alien mother pressed herself against the wall, her tiny child still clutched tight in her arms. Her whole body trembled. She had watched the man fight like no one she had ever seen before, like a storm given flesh. The man stood in the center of it all, his chest heaving, blood running down his arm. His grip on the weapon was steady, but his body was bruised and cut. His eyes glowed with fire, unbroken despite the weight of the battle. For a moment, silence hung heavy. The mother thought maybe it was over. Maybe he had saved them. Maybe they could rest. Then she heard it. More footsteps. Heavy. Relentless. the sound of many feet crushing the snow outside. The crunch echoed through the night. Shadows moved in the distance, larger and darker than before. Her heart dropped. She whispered in terror, "More! They come! More!" The man turned his head toward the doorway. His jaw tightened. He did not speak, but she saw it in his eyes. He already knew. The hunters had not come alone. This was only the first wave. The mother's arms tightened around her child. She wanted to beg him to run, to take her boy and save himself, but her voice failed her, and when she looked at him, she saw something that stopped her words. He wasn't planning to run. Not now. Not ever. The night roared as the door was slammed open again. Dozens of hunters poured inside. Their armor gleamed, their eyes burned, red in the firelight. Their roars shook the cabin walls. The mother gasped, covering her child's ears. Fear turned her heart into ice. No man could stand against so many. Not even him. But the man stepped forward, planting himself between her and the army of shadows. His weapon gleamed, dripping with the blood of those who had fallen. His voice was low, steady, and filled with steel. "Come then." The hunters roared and charged. The cabin erupted into chaos once more. Steel met steel, flesh tore. The sound of battle filled the air like thunder. The man moved fast, his body a blur of strength and fury. He struck down the first hunter, spun, and blocked another. Every movement was sharp, precise, born of endless battles before this night. But for each enemy he felled, two more came. The floor shook under their weight. The walls splintered as bodies crashed into them. The fire blazed higher, sparks flying, into the darkness. The mother could barely breathe. She pressed against the wall, whispering prayers into her child's hair. Her eyes never left him, the human who fought alone against many. His back was already cut, his face bloodied, yet he did not falter. He stood like an unbreakable wall, and every strike he made was to keep her hidden behind him. A hunter swung a massive blade toward his head. He ducked, drove his weapon through the creature's chest, and shoved it aside. Another leapt onto his back, claws digging into his flesh. He growled, twisted, and slammed the hunter into the floor with bone-breaking force. Blood sprayed across the cabin. The mother gasped, her tears flowing. She wanted to look away, but she couldn't. She had never seen such strength. She had never seen anyone fight not for themselves, but for someone else. Still, the hunters came. Their voices were cruel, their weapons relentless. The man staggered once, his knee bending, his breath harsh. Her heart stopped. Was this the moment he would fall? But then his eyes lifted, burning brighter than the fire. With a roar of his own, he rose again. His blade swept wide, cutting through three at once. His fist struck another, sending it crashing into the wall. His strength seemed endless, fueled by something deeper than rage, something born from his refusal to let her child die. The hunters hesitated for the first time. They had expected him to fall quickly. Instead, he stood in a pool of their dead, his body bleeding but unbroken, his breath heavy but steady. The leader stepped forward, taller than the rest, armored in black. His voice shook the room with cruel laughter. "Human," he snarled in her language, "you bleed for what is not yours. Why?" The man did not answer. He lifted his weapon, his silence heavier than any words. His eyes alone spoke. "Because they are under my protection," the leader roared, charging with a massive spear. The cabin shook as their weapons clashed, sparks flying like stars. The fight grew fiercer, faster, louder. The mother could hardly see through the blur of steel and fire. Her child whimpered, sensing her fear. She kissed his head, whispering, "Hold on, please, hold on." The battle raged on, walls cracked, the roof shook, snow and smoke filled the air. But still the man stood, alone against many, one against an army. And though his body bled, his spirit did not break. At last, with a final cry, he drove his weapon deep into the leader's chest. The creature roared, staggered, and fell, the floor shaking under its weight. The others froze. For the first time, They saw fear in their own eyes. The man stood over the fallen body, blood dripping, chest heaving. His shadow loomed tall, unyielding, like a beast carved from fire and storm. The hunters growled, uncertain. Would they flee, or would they throw themselves against him again? The mother's heart pounded. She knew this night was not done. But one truth had already been written. He was no ordinary man. He was a force they could not understand, and for her and her child, he was hope itself. The cabin smelled of smoke, blood, and frozen air. The fire had nearly burned down to glowing embers, but it still gave a little warmth in the dark. The man stood in the middle of the room, his body cut and bruised, his clothes torn and stained red. His chest rose and fell like a drum, heavy but steady. Around him lay the bodies of hunters, their dark forms silent at last. The alien mother sat in the corner, still clutching her child. Her wide eyes were locked on the man, her lips trembling. She had seen everything, how he had stood against an army, how he had refused to fall, how he had become a shield of flesh and fire between her and certain death. For a long time, no one spoke. Only the sound of his rough breathing and the faint whimper of the child filled the cabin. Finally, the man lowered his weapon. His hand shook as he set it against the wall. His knees bent slightly, and for a moment it looked like he might collapse. The mother gasped, rising halfway as if to call out. But then he straightened again, his shoulders squaring, his eyes burning as strong as before. He turned to her. The firelight caught his face, bloodied, scarred, and yet steady. "It's done," he said softly. She did not know the words, but his tone carried their meaning. Safe. Alive. Her breath hitched. She looked down at her child, who stirred weakly in her arms. His eyes blinked open, small and tired, but alive. She let out a sob, pressing her lips to his forehead. Her tears fell freely now, but they were tears of relief. The man crouched near the fire, feeding it the last of the wood he had gathered. Sparks leapt upward, chasing away the heavy shadows. Then he looked at her again. His gaze softened just slightly. She whispered, her voice broken but clear enough. "Why? Why you do this?" The man was silent for a long moment. His eyes lowered to the flames. He seemed to search for an answer buried deep in his chest. Finally he spoke, his voice low and rough. "Because no one else would." She did not understand every word, but she caught enough. Her heart clenched. For so long she had been told she was worthless, that her child was a curse, that her choice to protect him was weakness, and here was a man who had bled for them without asking anything in return. Her arms tightened around her son. She whispered, not to him, not to herself, but to the man before her. "You, Savior." The man gave no reply, but for the first time his lips curved into the smallest of smiles. The night stretched on, but slowly, slowly, the dark began to lift. Through the cracks in the broken walls, a pale light crept inside. The storm was gone. The long, cruel night was ending. The mother shifted closer to the fire, laying her child carefully on the warm floor beside her. His breathing was steady now. She pulled the man's coat tighter around him, watching the way his tiny chest rose and fell. Then she looked back at the man. He was seated near the door, his weapon resting beside him. Though his body was torn, his posture was strong. He kept his eyes on the pale morning outside, as if daring the world to send more enemies. For the first time since she had met him, she allowed herself to relax. She leaned her head against the wall, her body heavy with exhaustion. Her eyes drifted closed, but this time not from fear, not from despair. This time, it was safety that pulled her into sleep. When dawn fully arrived, golden light poured into the cabin. The snow outside glowed bright, no longer cruel but calm. The world looked softer, almost alive again. The man stood, stepping carefully over the broken bodies. He pushed open the ruined door and looked out. The forest stretched before him, quiet and wide. Smoke from the battle curled upward into the new day. Behind him, the mother stirred awake. She blinked at the light, then at him. For a moment, she thought he would leave. Panic struck her heart. "Please," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Don't go." He turned, his face unreadable, but his eyes steady on hers. He gave a small shake of his head. "I'm not leaving." Her heart broke again, but this time with something warm. She held her child close, her tears falling silently. The fire crackled, the morning grew bright, and for the first time in her life, she felt truly safe. Not because of walls, or weapons, or promises, but because of him. The hunters had come, with darkness, with hate, with chains. But the human had stood with nothing but his body, his will, and his fire. And in doing so, he had given her something priceless. Not just life. Hope. As the sun rose higher, the warmth touched all three of them. A mother, a child, and a silent stranger who had become more than a man. The frozen night was over. The warm dawn had begun.